Hey everyone. Today we need to talk about a major shift affecting jobs, communities, and the products we buy every day. 5 major companies have told former President Trump they're leaving the US, and it all comes down to tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods meant to make foreign products more expensive and encourage buying American. Sounds simple, right? But the reality is far more complicated. We're looking at 5 iconic companies and how these policies are forcing them to make tough choices. Why are they moving operations overseas? What does this mean for American workers and our economy? This is about supply chains, global markets, and real people. Let's break down the real cost of tariffs and what's at stake. No politics, just facts and consequences. Let's dive in. First up, Ford Motor Company, a symbol of American manufacturing. Ford recently announced it's shifting production of certain models like the Focus Active overseas. Why? Tariffs on steel and aluminum made building cars in the US much more expensive. Ford faced a billion-dollar hit. Their options: absorb the cost, raise prices, or move production. They chose to move. Even with some tariffs, building in China was cheaper than absorbing US material costs. This decision sent shockwaves through communities that rely on Ford for jobs. It's not just assembly line workers, engineers, suppliers, truck drivers, and local businesses all feel the impact. When Ford moves production, entire local economies are affected. These are well-paying union jobs that have supported families for generations. The loss isn't just numbers, it's personal for thousands of families. This move also raises questions about the future of US auto manufacturing. If it's cheaper to build cars elsewhere, what happens to American industry? Other countries are eager for these jobs and investments. Ford's decision was a direct response to tariffs, not a lack of patriotism. It highlights how interconnected our economy is. A policy in DC can change lives in Michigan. The administration pushed back, but Ford had to answer to shareholders and manage costs. Tariffs, meant to protect, ended up penalizing US manufacturing. It's a complex situation with no easy answers. Ford's story is the first and most iconic example of how tariffs can backfire. The ripple effects are real, and they're just beginning. Let's see how this plays out in other industries. Now, from horsepower to processing power, Intel. Intel's chips power everything from laptops to data centers, and they've long manufactured in the US, but with new tariffs, Intel announced major expansions abroad, especially in Europe and Asia. Why? Their supply chain is global, and tariffs on materials from China and elsewhere made US production riskier and more expensive. Building a new chip plant costs billions and takes years. You need stability, not trade wars. Tariffs created uncertainty, making it harder to plan long-term investments in the US. By expanding overseas, Intel could avoid supply chain disruptions and stay close to key markets. The impact? Lost investment and high-tech jobs that could have gone to American workers. There's also a national security angle. Semiconductors are critical infrastructure. If too much chip manufacturing moves offshore, the US becomes vulnerable and dependent on others. Intel's move wasn't just about business, it's about America's place in the future of technology. Tariffs, meant to bring jobs back, pushed a tech giant to hedge its bets elsewhere. It's a cautionary tale. Economic policy can have far-reaching, unintended consequences. The chip challenge is real, and it affects more than just the tech sector. Let's look at how tariffs hit closer to home. Let's talk about Whirlpool, the company behind the appliances in your home. Whirlpool initially supported tariffs, hoping they'd protect against foreign competition. But tariffs on steel and aluminum, their main materials, drove up costs by hundreds of millions. The benefit from tariffs on imported washers was wiped out by higher material costs. Suddenly, making appliances in the US became much less viable. Whirlpool began considering moving some production overseas to cut costs. The logic: if it's cheaper to build abroad and import, that's what shareholders expect. The result? Uncertainty for American workers and entire towns built around Whirlpool factories. These aren't just jobs, they're the backbone of local economies. Higher costs also hit consumers. Appliance prices went up for American families. Tariffs meant to help ended up hurting both workers and buyers. Whirlpool's story shows how targeted policies can have unintended contradictory effects. Trying to protect one part of the business ended up threatening another. The company had to consider moving jobs overseas, the very thing tariffs were supposed to prevent. It's a classic case of economic whiplash. The spin cycle isn't just in your laundry room, it's in the economy too. Now let's see how heavy industry fared. Next, Caterpillar, the name behind the yellow machines building our roads and farms. Caterpillar is a major exporter relying on global sales for its heavy machinery. Tariffs on steel raised their U.S. manufacturing costs, squeezing profits. But the bigger hit came from retaliatory tariffs. Countries like China and the EU slapped new taxes on American-made machinery. Suddenly, Caterpillar's products were much more expensive overseas, making them less competitive. To stay in business, Caterpillar shifted investment and production to foreign plants. Building in China or Europe let them avoid tariffs and serve those markets directly. The downside, U.S. jobs and investment moved abroad. Instead of expanding in Illinois, they grew factories elsewhere. This is a direct transfer of economic activity out of the U.S., driven by trade policy. For major exporters, tariffs are a double whammy: higher costs at home, lost sales abroad. Caterpillar had to choose keep U.S. manufacturing or keep global customers. Many companies, to survive, chose to move. The result: fewer American jobs, more uncertainty for workers. Tariffs meant to protect ended up pushing business away. For Caterpillar and its workers, it's a heavy load to bear. The story repeats across industries. Let's finish with an American icon. Finally, Harley-Davidson, the symbol of American freedom and the open road. The EU hit back at U.S. tariffs by raising tariffs on Harleys from 6% to 31%. Europe is Harley's second biggest market, and this price hike threatened their sales. The company faced a $100 million annual hit, too much to absorb or pass on to customers. Their solution moved production for the EU market out of the US to places like Thailand. This sparked outrage, an American icon moving jobs overseas. The administration criticized the move, but Harley said it was about survival, not abandoning America. US plants stayed open for domestic sales, but the EU tariff left them no choice for exports. Harley was caught between loyalty to US manufacturing and the need to stay in business abroad. It's a no-win situation: lose sales or face backlash at home. The story shows how trade wars put even the most American brands in impossible positions. The freedom to trade was restricted by economic barriers. Moving production wasn't unpatriotic, it was necessary. Harley's rough ride is a warning for all global brands. Tariffs can turn icons into casualties. Let's wrap up with the big picture. So, what have we learned? Tariffs meant to protect American industry often pushed companies to move jobs and investment overseas. The result: higher costs, lost jobs, and uncertainty for workers and communities. These decisions weren't made lightly. They were responses to a tough new economic reality. In a global economy, actions have complex, unintended consequences. Understanding these mechanics is crucial as the story continues to unfold. The long-term effects on the American economy are still unknown. We need to keep watching and learning as these changes play out. Thanks for joining me to break this down. If you found this helpful, like and share the video. Stay informed and subscribe for more updates on the global economy.